many of you know, MCC has a practice that asks clergy who are leaving congregations to not come back to that congregation for at least 1 week. Hold on to your pants. While there are very good reasons for this practice, Reverend Renee and I have agreed together that in this case, there's no reason for that practice to be in place. Many of you have expressed to me your feelings of love and care for Reverend Renee, and I'm happy to say that that is an easy thing for me to understand because I have loved and cared about her for a very long time, longer than you. And so it seems to me that there's no reason at any time, Renee, that you and Terry want to join us here in worship or just to come for any reason. You will always be welcome. Yes. So as a sign of our mutual support and love for one another, Reverend Renee and I want to ask you to join us in a ritual that we have named Between Us. So we'll ask you to look on the screens for the word all and join us as we move through this very meaningful time. Reverend Renee, you answered the call to lead this congregation through a time of transition. A transition that included anger and grief and doubt, but it was also laced with hope and determination. You have been the perfect shepherd to this community and have served it gracefully, sacrificially, and lovingly. I want to personally thank you for your ministry here, because I know there is no doubt that it will make the foundation of my ministry here to begin a much easier one. You deserve our thanks, our love, and our best hopes for whatever is next on your journey. Bless God, Reverend Renee, as she moves into the next part of her journey. Reverend Renee, you are always welcome here, and you will always be with us in spirit. Reverend Renee, we are grateful for your time with us, and give God thanks for you.
Reverend Lily, as you began your ministry in this wonderful place and with this beautiful congregation, I pray that God will use your gifts and skills to bless this community.
God, in your kindness, give grace and clarity to our new pastor.
As you move into a new future together, may God shine the light on your path and anoint all that you do.
God, give us the passion and strength that we need to do your work and your will.
Reverend Lily, I now place this stole around your neck as a symbol of the passing of the mantle between us. May it remind you of the responsibility and joy that it is to serve this congregation.
I gladly receive this mantle and commit to God and all of you that I will give from my very best, from the very best places of my heart and soul as I serve you. Thank you, God, for the love and love between us all. Amen. Well, good morning, Trinity. Oh, we're finally here. Wow. I don't think you're as worn out as I am getting here and getting to this place, but I don't even feel that fatigue because I'm so excited to be here as your new senior pastor. Thank you for giving me that incredible blessing and for your vote of confidence and faith in me as your new leader. I thought it might be helpful if I just give you a little bit of an update about where things are with my life and things that are helping us to get here and get settled. I've been here for a couple of weeks. I did bring some cold weather with me, and that was on purpose. Because I do not like the heat. And so I was really glad to have a minute to just kind of phase into this whole hot thing, which I'm not particularly looking forward to, but you at least know how much I love you. But I will be here so I want to just publicly thank Liz and Charlene Mazordi. I met with some of you know them. They are a couple that I've known for a long time. They attend church at some post CCT. But they have graciously opened their home for me to stay with them. And my little dog Bella, until Kate joins us, so I wanted to thank them publicly. Kate, my partner, will arrive on February 14th, so she is going to get here for Valentine's Day, and I'm grateful for that. We have bought a new house, and we will close at the end of February. So I guess since we bought a house, we're going to stay. I have our dog Bella, and she has our cats, and she is still, in St. Louis, sort of wrapping things up. And so we're just grateful that everything has happened just as it needed to happen right on time. And it's teaching me, and I hope that it will teach you as you watch, that if we can just lean into those moments when we're not sure what's going to happen next, that God fills in those gaps. The Spirit is always with us, filling in those gaps. I want to ask, if I could, that for these first couple of weeks, you give me just a little bit of time to get my footing and my bearings and sort of get accustomed to what all is happening in my life, not only here at church but otherwise. And just know that I will begin in a couple of weeks. I want to reach out to you individually and in different groups and to be accessible for all the work we have to do together from here. But if you'll just give me a couple of weeks, I would appreciate having that just to kind of get my feet on the ground here in Florida. So we're going to do this series for the month of February. So while we celebrate Black History Month and we think about our relationships to each other, then I want us to think about how shift happens and how with the drop of one consonant, you can have a whole different world. So I want us for these 4 weeks to talk about how shift happens today between us, how shift happens in us next week, how shift happens through us on the third Sunday, and then finally, how shift happens beyond us. So I hope you'll be here for every Sunday. It looks like you showed up for my first day. I hope you will show up for my second and third day, and be here for this next series. So as we listen, and we listen attentively for the Spirit, would you please join me in prayer? Holy One, we give you thanks that we're in this place together with you and that you have been here all morning preparing our hearts. So I ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts might rise up to meet you and that you will be pleased. May it be so in your many names. Amen. It seems that there was an older couple who went to the Holy Land on a long-awaited vacation. Unfortunately, about halfway through the vacation, the husband had a heart attack and died. The undertaker of the funeral home where they were preparing the body said to the wife, look, here are your choices. You can spend about $500 and we will bury your husband right here in the Holy Land. Or you can spend about $5,000 and we will ship his body home to the United States and you can have a burial there for him. The wife thought for just a moment and actually pretty quickly said, you know what, I want to just pay the money and ship him back to the United States for burial. The undertaker said, sure, okay. But he said, because I'm curious, why is it that you want to spend the money, but also why you wouldn't want to just have your husband buried in the Holy Land? The wife looked at the undertaker and she said, because, 2,000 years ago, you buried a man here, and 3 days after that, he rose from the dead, and I just cannot take that seriously. said that essentially our life boils down to a long series of choices and decisions. Now, if that's true, and perhaps it is, we really don't pay enough attention to the choices and decisions we make, right? I wonder if we had thought about that early in our lives, if we would have been a little more intentional about the decisions we make. I wonder if we'd been a little more conscious about the decisions we make. I know when I look back on my life, there are certainly some I wish I had thought through more thoroughly. And I bet I'm not alone in that. But anyway, we do make these decisions and choices. Sometimes they are more impactful than others, but we make them every day and all the time. This idea of making decisions and choices has caused me to think about it a little bit more over the last couple of weeks, and wondering how people arrive at the decisions they make. How do people get to that place where they just make a decision? So am I wondering, I Googled it, of course. I Googled decision-making strategies and looked around a little bit for some advice about how people make good decisions. So if you feel like you need a good decision-making strategy, just Google it. There is an infinite wealth of information for you to use. So certainly we can't deny that we use some sort of strategy, but I also think we can't deny that personality, just how we're wired and put together, also has a role in the decisions that we make. So just think about it with me for a moment. Some people make decisions very quick and on the spot. Others sit with their options forever. And then they finally come to a place where they're ready to make a decision. Some strictly use how they feel. And they respond and make decisions with their gut, basically. Some people make decisions by avoiding making decisions, as if avoidance in and of itself is also a decision. Some wait for somebody else to decide. Some are methodical and linear and logical all the way through in the decision-making process. Some have decision remorse, and they bail out of the decision long before it has any chance to play itself out. Some decide only if they're forced to do that. So you get the idea, right? We do it different ways. So whether it is through a learned strategy or because of personality or both, making decisions plays a huge role in our lives. And then there is this issue of defining moments. Like our wife in the story. For her, that was a defining moment. So there is this issue of that moment when it's more than a decision, it's more than a choice. It is a moment when what we do and what we decide literally changes everything. Defining moments. I would suggest to you that the story we just heard about Moses and the children of Israel is a defining moment story. Now let's just review the story a little bit and quickly, just to remind us of some of the particular pieces and parts of the story. We pick up the story where Moses asks some of the leaders of the Israelites to go into the promised land and to look around, to take stock of what they find there. In some translations, it calls these leaders spies. And so that's where we pick up the story. But just a little bit of a reminder about what's happened up until then. The children of Israel had escaped from Egypt, and Moses had led them away from Egypt, out of slavery, out of bondage, and they had been wandering around in the desert, headed to the promised land. It was a pretty difficult life sometimes in the promised land. There were times when they couldn't find anything to eat or drink, or they lost their way. There are some depictions of this where the children of Israel are just walking in a circle. They just can't seem to find their way. And yet, in all of those moments when things are not going right, there is a provision made for them. So as the children of Israel come to this place and they camp right outside, right at the foot of a place called the Promised Land, Moses chooses some of the leaders of this congregation and sends them off as God had asked to take a look at the promised land. So, they get there, they look around, they find that there is indeed, just as God had promised, milk and honey. A land flowing with milk and honey. They find that the produce is plentiful. They even arranged to take some back with them. They also found, though, that there were people there who to them were giants. In some translations it says we felt like grasshoppers, those people were so big. They found that there were fortresses everywhere, and there were barriers, there were difficulties in taking the land. They go back, and they call basically a congregational meeting in order for them to give a report. And the report sounded like this. Look, we brought back some fruit that you made. It is absolutely true that it is a land flowing with milk and honey. But, the hanging butt, I say. Oh, there it is, always, right? But, there are so many challenges. Those people are giants. They're huge. They are fortified to the hilt. There is no way that we can go and take that land. This was the report to the congregation. And then, at the end of that report, one man raised his hand and said, wait a minute, I believe we can go and take that land. We can do this. We can do this. Caleb, the one lone voice who said we can do this, was giving a different report to the congregation. And even as he was talking, Scripture says that the other people who had been giving a report began to talk louder than Caleb, so as to drown out his notion that we can do this. This is an interesting story of one guy who had the courage to say, we can do this. The congregation of Israel, they got so angry at God and at Moses, they began to curse. And they began to say, we should have just gone back to Egypt to be slaves. It would be better to go back to slavery and die than to be stuck right here having been misled. Wow, right? Ever had a congregational meeting like that? Yes, you have. And yes, we will. And so the lesson here for us, I think, is one we better not walk away from, that we better take head on. Because I think that moment qualifies as a defining moment. Would you agree? At this defining moment, the children of Israel choked. They came right up to the promise, to the gift, and they choked. When it mattered most, the congregation of Israel got distracted by fighting with each other. Ever heard that song? They got stuck right in that place because of their disagreements. The congregation of Israel essentially lost their minds, and they forgot who they were. They forgot that every time they were hungry, a provision was made for them to eat. They forgot that every time they lost their way, God guided them to find their way. They forgot that every time they were thirsty, some sort of drink was provided for them. They simply forgot who they were. Now the question for us this morning is, do we do that sometimes? Do we walk right up to defining moments in our lives and choke? Do we get distracted over petty things? Do we miss defining moments because of our need to be right? Oh no, now. My dad would say, she's gone meddling and quit preaching. Do we miss defining moments because we let our differing viewing points become disagreements? My friends, those two things are not the same. We can hold differing views of something and they not become a disagreement. But if we choke, we make them disagreements. Do we forget who we are sometimes? Do we forget that in those moments, the Spirit of God is moving like the wind all around us, urging us, guiding us, pushing us, showing us the promise? So as a church, do you think that sometimes we walk right up to a defining moment? We walk right up to the gift, and we choke. I haven't been here very long, but I don't have to be here to know that of course we do. Of course we do. So it seems to me that it makes sense to imagine, if we could for a moment, what Caleb, the one lone voice that says, yes, we can do this, what would Caleb teach us this morning about defining moments that might help us not to choke? So I think, first of all, that Caleb would tell us that defining moments always involve risk. Now, I know that for many of us, that is challenging. So for all of the control queens in the room, this is a challenge. By the way, I think that is a very gender-fluid term. Because there are control queens of all stripes. This pushes us to our limits sometimes, to know that defining moments will always involve risk. There is something almost primal about us in terms of the power that risk can have over us. There's an author, Larry Water, who wrote a book called Risk Management. It's 19 chapters. You'll be glad I'm not going to read hardly any of it. But he writes about risk management. But one of the really funny things he has in his book is he said that we have a thing called risk block that is much like gridlock, because it is something that causes us to not be able to go anywhere or do anything because of risk block. Much like gridlock, it keeps us from doing what we might need to do or go where we need to go. So then what is between us is stuckness. All because of a little risk. I think Caleb would also say that defining moments invoke fear. That every insecurity, every scary thought, every feeling that we are not enough starts rising up to the surface, and there it is right in front of us, right? The fear stops us in our tracks, and the worst of it is, when fear takes over, creativity is shut down, and any of the solutions that might have come from our creativity are blocked by our fear. When this happens, you know what else is going on between us? We don't even see each other anymore. We just see the fear. That's all we see. And if all I can see in your eyes is fear, and all you can experience from my actions is fear, then we will never know one another really, will we? So fear can paralyze us, and it can bring us to this place where we are unable to see each other. I think Caleb would also say that this thing of defining moments irritates our convictions. Now, I don't know, it's probably not very smart that on my first Sunday I'm going to step on your toes a little bit. Hey, might as well get used to it now. It irritates our convictions. Now listen, on those days we would sit in a room like this and we would all say, we absolutely believe in miracles. We would all say, we believe that God has the power to intervene in our lives in miraculous ways. Amen? We would even quote scripture to each other and say, with God all things are possible. We would say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we would beat our chest and say, yes, we're all right. Until, that is, a defining moment comes. And we have to take a risk. And we have to overcome our fear. And then all of a sudden, we lean on our own steam. We take God out of the equation and we forget, that God can do all things, that it's possible. We forget. So our convictions are tested during defining moments. And we actually get to decide whether we will lean into that spirit that fills in the gaps, or we will choke on our own insistence that we have to go it alone. I hope that we will come to a place together that we are seriously convicted, not just circumstantially convicted. That God can do miraculous things between us. And when that happens, there is no stopping. Finally, I think that Caleb would say, the defining moments introduce impossibility. Produces impossibility. Renee, we may have been at this same conference, I won't say how many years ago, it's a long while. But ACC pastors and leaders at one time would every year go to the Crystal Cathedral and listen to Robert Schuller talk about church growth. And so my first time there, as I was pastor on staff at Cathedral of Hope, my first time at this conference, Robert Schuller got up to speak, and even by then, he was starting to get up in years, but still a very powerful voice. And what he did was to share with us the whole story of how the Crystal Cathedral came to be. In part, he shared with us all of the significant challenges there were in buying that campus and building that building. He had a drive-in church for a while, like seriously, on the screen outside. Yeah, just like an old drive-in. And so he was telling us about some of these really remarkable moments when it seemed like it was all just going to die, that there was just no way beyond the challenges they faced. And I remember his long story, it was really fascinating, and he walked out from behind the pulpit and he said, I feel like I just need to stop here and say that one thing I learned by all of these challenges was that every time God called us to do something impossible, we ought to say yes. Because otherwise, what we are saying is that we don't need God. If we could do it on our own, if it was possible for us to do it, then we would have no need for God. So what are we even doing here? What's the point? That stuck with me all these years. It stuck with me profoundly. Because if the church is not here to say that it is possible even when it seems impossible, then I don't know why we are here. We will encounter a lot of challenges. We will encounter a lot of people who need us in ways we cannot figure out how we are going to respond. But somehow we will. You know why we will? Because God is still in the business of doing what is impossible. And I am eternally grateful that every morning I can wake up and tell myself and tell you, God is still God. And God is still making the impossible possible. Caleb and his family went over into the Promised Land. And they had a blessed life in that land. You know what else is true? All of those people who said we can't do it never made it there. And they continue to live in the desert as people of desperation. I make that point to say it was a defining moment, no matter what the decision was. For some, it was a decision that brought blessing. For others, it was a decision that brought desperation. But it was a defining moment either way. For the congregation of Israel, there was a defining moment, and Caleb said, we can do this. In Church of the Trinity, We have a defining moment coming up for us. We are about to ask God to speak to us, to move among us, to show us a new way. So we are coming up on a time when we will have to decide if we're going to choke or if we're going to say we can do this. We'll get a chance to decide whether we want to be distracted with petty differences or whether we want to get over ourselves and say we can do this. So our job over the next few months, as I see it, is to seek our defining moment. Not wait for it to just show up one day, but to seek it. And as we seek, we will need to start digging deep and remembering who we are. Because finding our promised land is going to do some things that upset our apple carts. Finding our promised land is going to call us to a spiritual maturity that we've never had to develop before. My job is to keep pushing us, to dig deep into our spiritual selves and find that miraculous God in us. Finding our promised land is going to call us to quit thinking about Egypt and about what used to be. We need to stop thinking that if we go back to Egypt, that it's somehow going to be better. And we need to start thinking about the new landscape that God is preparing for us. Because we are finding our promised land, it's going to call us to let go of life in the desert and cling to a life that is flowing with milk and honey. Finding our promised land is going to call us to start practicing loving each other, even when we disagree, and to start facing our fears head on. This is another one. We all agree. You know, that we have to love one another until it's time to love one another. In our gospel reading, it says, Jesus said, it's just as simple. People will recognize you as a Christian by the way you love each other, not by the way you smoke your cigarette or don't. Not by the way you drink or don't. Not by the way your language is or isn't. Not by all of these do's and don'ts, but simply by how we love each other. So it's going to call on us to do that. Finding our promised land is going to call us to start practicing this and to renew our conviction that with God, even the possible, even the impossible, can be made possible. So Trinity, Church of Israel, if we do our work, our spiritual work, you hear that? There's lots of work to do, but the most important work is our spiritual work. We'll do that when the time comes, when our defining moment comes. We won't miss our promised land, but rather, we will be ready to say, we can do this. That's what it will say. So I want all of you to stand up and we're going to practice what it feels like to be the voice of God as you're able. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make some declarations, and at the end of each one, I want you to say we can do this. And just to practice, okay, because I want this to be very much like you're convicted about it. Okay? So just together, we can do this.
We can do this.
One more time.
We can do this.
When we have moments that we get out of sorts with each other, instead of taking our marbles and go home, we will say,
we can do this.
When someone gets a glimpse of God's call and it sounds impossible, instead of spending our breath on what we cannot do, we will say,
we can do this.
When we get discouraged and afraid or things do not seem to be going our way, we will say,
we can do this.
When the moment comes and the promised land is in our sight, instead of backing away, we will remember who we are and say,
We can do this.
yes. May it be that one day our souls just open up and we say, we can do this. May it